Hey, Paul.
Hey, Fab, how's it going?
Good yourself?
Good.
Cool. Yeah, I'm somewhat excited about this show. I've been thinking about
So
it for a little
why?
while, so I'm happy that we
Yeah.
finally get to talk about it. So, obviously, for anybody who's been listening to this show for a while, or even if they've just kind of hopped in, we've talked a lot about a lot of different things in the world of sales, and sales performance, and trying to help sales leaders improve their teams. But I felt we're getting to a point where, and I'm hoping this topic comes up regularly, but where there's a lot of information out there, right? There's a lot of things a sales leader can do to quote unquote improve results, and there's stuff that they don't like their salespeople. There's things that they don't control, and there's things that they do control. Like things that they don't control, the overall market, other groups within the organization, right? Like if you're delivering a product and the development, the manufacturing team doesn't increase capability, then your sales get hindered. Company leadership, priorities, and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff you don't directly impact, but there's a lot of stuff that you do. And I feel it can get overwhelming for a sales leader, whether they're listening to this show or just going online or going to conferences or whatever. There's a lot of things you can do to improve the success of your sales team. So I wanted today to get your opinion and obviously like share my expertise on what do you need to do to prioritize, what do you need to prioritize to get results, right? Because otherwise it just feels like throwing spaghetti to the wall and seeing what sticks, right? Like, oh, maybe we'll do a CRM, or maybe we'll revamp the sales process, or we'll train the team, but it's all disjointed, right? And at the end, what I've seen when sales teams take that approach is like at the end of the day, nothing works, right? Because it's all kind of half done. So in your again, I'll pass the buck to you. I guess where do you see
Well,
this conversation
to
going
set
from
the
here?
table with all this, and you're right. So the priorities really, the first thing you have to do is have the right mindset, I would say. And so quickly, the right mindset is you can't force anyone to do anything, but you can discover what motivates them and understand what drives them so that you can add the proper fuel to the fire, we'll say. So
Yeah,
I want to preface it with that because um, the stick doesn't really work unless you're using the stick on yourself.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I,
And I
I
mean,
just want I want to I
I
wanted to
agree with
preface
you.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but that's a good preference and preface. Sorry, and we will get in more tactical stuff in a second. But like, and I keep bringing this book back regularly, like in the inner game of tennis, right, which is like a well known tennis coach and whatnot. And in there, there's like a part that really stood out to me, which is like you can't force a tennis player to improve a certain part of their game, right? Like if the tennis player doesn't feel they have a problem or wants to tackle that problem, it's not going to happen. And it's the same thing there, right? Like if your salesperson doesn't feel their CRM is the problem, revamping your CRM is not going to do anything, right? Like you have to tackle what the person and the team and even the executive team, almost sometimes even more importantly, the executive team feel is the priority. So yeah, I think that's a key to me. That's the key first step, or step zero, if you want. Like that's the groundwork. Is like you need to review your mindset, realize that you're not going to be able to force anything down anybody's throat. Really.
Yep. Yeah. I 100%. If you don't have the buy-in, it's not going to happen. So, and you're right, up and down. If you're a sales leader, usually you get the buy-in from the up because you're not needing to change their behavior, or hopefully not, or else it's a much harder task. But
Yeah.
to try to improve behavior of your, I don't want to say subordinates, but of the people that report to you, your
Your team. Yeah.
colleagues, your team. Thank you, your team. I sound like a dictator when I say that. But anyways,
Your subordinates. Your minions.
your minions. So, and there, I think there's some steps. So let's say you're a new leader. We talked about this, but offline a little bit. So let's say you're a new leader. You're coming into a new team. You've been hired, and you need to figure out what's going on. To me, so we said it before. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, And the first step is an assessment. You're coming in, you got to assess what's going on. You can't just come in there barking orders. And in
Right.
that assessment, like we were saying before, is, you're looking at sales talent, you're looking at their desire, you're looking at their expertise of the product they're selling. You're looking process wise, you're looking at the sales process, you're looking at the CRM. We've talked about this a million times, you and I, but is the CRM actually a sales assistant, or is it some clunky thing? Is it a ball and chain? And do you have a playbook? So you're assessing all this, and you're assessing the team. Like, can they sell? Can they not sell? What's the structure? Who are the clients? You're taking the time to. So that's step number one. Just step back, look at it, and what's really going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's step number one.
Yeah.
And I'd say, sorry, were you saying something? Sorry.
No, I mean, you're right. Like that's what you need. That's definitely your first step. You need to understand the lay of the land, because if the idea here that we're discussing is that there's a lot of things you need to do, you kind of have to get an idea of how all the key parts of a sales organization are functioning, right? So if you have a lot of talent but the desire is low, like, well, that's one thing that you'll need to tackle. Or if your desire and expertise are high but the talent's low, then there's something to do there. Or if there's no real sales process and people are just doing whatever they think is makes sense. Or like you said, if your CRM is just like a place where there's a whole bunch of contacts and just a mess and a disaster, and half the deals aren't even recorded, and or vice versa, right? If it's just a burden, right? Like there's like 67
Yep.
things to do for every step of the way. Like it's a burden.
Yep.
And so yeah, assessment is definitely key. And I mean, there's maybe others in there as well, right? Like we had talked about online, like that word,
Operationalizing.
operationalizing, right? Like how beyond your CRM, like how does sales work? Like where are they getting leads
Yep.
from?
Yep.
I've been for example, speaking to a lot of sales team, and prospecting for a lot of people is a challenge, not
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they don't know
absolutely.
where to
That's
find the
part of your
prospect.
assessment. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's part of your
like
assessment. How do you prospect? How's it happening? How do you operationalize that? Is
how
it
do you
getting
enter
done?
contacts in the CRM, right? Like a
Yeah,
lot of CRMs, I mean, HubSpot, I'm thinking of obviously is, everything is based off of an email address. But, when you're prospecting and you're on LinkedIn, you don't always have somebody's email address,
yeah,
right? But
yeah,
you want to record that activity because you want
yeah.
to be able to tell your boss, like, I've been
Well,
doing
there
something.
we're really getting into the weeds, but yeah, all of that stuff. I mean, it's huge,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
as you come in, you need to assess all this stuff. Tactically speaking, the talent, the soft skills, the expertise, and then the process, everything that's wrapped around recording, CRM, marketing, prospecting, all this. So you're assessing all that, and then
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing when you're assessing all that, then you're analyzing. You're saying, okay, I'm analyzing all this. What does it mean? Where are the gaps?
Yeah.
Where are the things that we want to make? So if your gaps are in your sales process, and you can attest this way more than I do, but most people's CRMs or their use of their CRMs suck. So there's usually, that's why you have a job and you're doing quite well. So obviously there's a lot going there. And then the sales expertise, well, that belongs, sorry, the product expertise, that belongs to the company. It's not for an outside, it's not for your sales manager to educate your team usually on the expertise of the product. So if I take, for example, pharmaceutical products, you have experts internally that teach the people about the product, and that's very important, of course. And then you have the sales expertise. As a sales manager, that's where you come in and you can really help your team move forward. So when you're analyzing all these things, you got to say, okay, where can I make a difference as a sales manager? But
Mm-hmm.
really what you're trying to do is, where can I light the fire under the asses of my team for them to do the right things to make them move forward? So you do that analysis, and then you create some kind of plan. That's awesome. And what most sales leaders do is they bark the plan out to their team, activate, But there's
Yeah.
a really important step there.
But wait, can we just, before we get back to the plan, 2 seconds? I just have we kind of skimmed over analysis here, but
Okay.
what does that entail? And I realize there's like obviously analysis of
Well,
the sales
Fab, let
talent and
me
all that is very
let me go
different.
through
But
all the steps, and then we'll
okay,
come back to analysis and go much more in depth. So then,
fair
and I
enough.
agree with you, like we just skimmed over, but we'll come back to it. We'll go more in depth there. So But once you have that plan, you necessarily need to get the buy-in from the team. Because
Yeah.
as a sales manager, a good leader doesn't do stuff for his team. He doesn't do the activities for his team. He gets them motivated to do what they need to do to get there. So you need to
Right.
get that buy-in. Your team needs to be bought into what they need to do, because let's face it, if you have 8 reps reporting to you, you can't be on the field with them every day, all the time, making sure they're doing the right thing. So they have to want to do the right thing. And if they are not doing the right thing, they have to want to learn to do the right thing, or be motivated to do the right thing. So you need to get their buy-in, and we'll talk a lot more about that. And then once you have the buy-in, activate,
Yeah.
move forward. So now let's
And I
come
would
back
add
to
a
that.
I would add a last stage, which
Oh,
is because
sure.
that's usually the part that I see, and that's the stage that nobody wants to do, because um, it's realizing that revamping a sales team is a process and not a project, right? It's not something that you do one time and it's done.
Yeah.
And so you activate it, but then you need to find a way to track and to review and to iterate, right? Like, because it's not like, okay, well, expertise is our main thing, so we'll get product to come and train the team, and boom, we're done, right? Like, it's something that you need
Yeah.
to track, like how often, like how are we going to determine whether this team has expertise, and blah 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 blah, right? Or how are we going to determine that our new CRM is now working, or how are we determining that
Yeah.
we've operationalized the key elements that we're lacking operationalization. That to me is like the critical step that, full transparency, nobody wants to do, right? Nobody wants to be like, well, now I'm going to spend X thousands of dollars a month to just iterate and track and review. I want it to be
Oh,
done, right?
you're totally right, Fab. People think, okay, we activate this, everyone's going to know what to do, and then that's it. And you're right. Part of activation is having something that is sustainable and continuous. That's what you're
Yeah,
talking about,
yeah,
and that's called a process. So activate, then, because part of your plan is to see what the process is going to be, and then you're activating that process. You're making sure
yeah,
it's going to happen and continue happening. Because you're
yeah.
right, it's not about and I was talking about this with you a little bit earlier online before you got on. Talking about David Goggins.
Mm,
It's not, oh, I'm going to do this once, it's going to happen. You got to keep doing it. It's going to keep being hard, but you have to want it to be hard, and
yeah,
just keep moving forward. When he's talking about training and whatnot, and trying
yeah,
to be your best, no one else can motivate you. But if you have a process that works, well, that process works every day. It doesn't
yeah.
just work once and then we forget about it, like some magic training once a year, and then everyone goes out and does the right thing.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
we bring up, because we both kind of exercise. We bring out working out a lot, right? It's not by doing one intense training a year that you become fit, right? It's better to go work out even 15 minutes every day. You'll get better results at the end of the year than if you just like pack it in. We'll do like 1 2 hour intense
Yeah.
training on January 1st, and we'll be good until next January.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just doesn't work, right?
Well,
So it's the same
many
thing there.
many parentheses there. I listened to podcasts, and I don't mind doing a shout out to him because I think he's a brilliant guy. A guy called Andrew Huberman, who does Huberman
Everybody
Labs.
knows.
Yeah,
Everybody knows.
everyone knows it. It's a big podcast.
he
And,
was he was a speaker at last year's Inbound HubSpot
oh,
Sales
awesome.
Conference.
So,
Yeah.
and he talks about I think it's called the anterior lateral cortex, which is a
Okay.
small part of your brain. And that small part of your brain, they've done tests, people who live a long time, whatnot. It's quite big. And what it is that it's kind of strange. They figured out that when you do things that are good for you, but you don't feel like doing, that part of your brain gets bigger and you get better at it. So
Hmm.
if you're an athlete who, does a grueling training every day, but you don't feel like it when you get up, but you just do it anyways, well, that part of your brain will increase. And he even, I don't want to, this is him saying, but he says that it tends to be smaller in obese people, and it tends to be bigger in athletes. It tends to be bigger in people who live a long time. So it's not about doing something you like. And often in sales, there's a lot of stuff you have to do that you don't like.
Yeah.
Filling in your CRM, doing cold calls, on a rainy day, or going to knock on doors. So this is, part of sales is doing these things. So, anyways, that's the parentheses. It's
Yeah.
great, and it helps you get to do the right thing. So sometimes you don't feel like working out. You get up in the morning, but you go and you get used to it. It becomes a habit. You just do it. And
Yeah.
part of sales is like that. And the reward is, hey, you'll get a big commission check at the end of the month because you worked your ass off. But getting there is tough. It's like climbing a wet mountain in the Rockies with not enough gear on sometimes, and
Yeah.
it's not always easy. But once you get to the top, you're happy you did it. And the more you do that, the more you feed that little part of your brain that says, "Hey, I'm going to do things I don't like because it's rewarding in the end and it's good for me."
Yeah.
So, anyways, close the parentheses. Back to our conversation. As a new salesperson, when you're doing the analysis, as a new
Sales
sales leader,
leader.
when you're
Yeah.
doing the analysis, you bring the expertise. If it's a new job, you bring the expertise. Hopefully, you know what the gaps are that you see. Then
Yeah.
once you've done that analysis, then you start formulating your
Mhm.
plan that you will eventually activate that create into a process. But that buy-in part is huge. And
Yeah.
that's psychology, that's human nature. How you're going to get those people to say, "Yeah, I'm willing to do the hard stuff and get there."
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
anyways.
So to me, like when we're doing the analysis, it doesn't have to be like a steadfast scientific process, but there's got to be some data to it, right? So sales talent is not just like, oh well, Mike doesn't know what's going on here. Like he's great at shitty salesperson, but like Mary's amazing. Like there has to be some quantification there, right? Yeah. And so
I totally agree with you, but I'll push even further. I think it has to be based on pre-established things. So if you just go in there and it's
right.
all willy-nilly, and I think this and I think that's not going to work, you do
Yeah.
have to have capability of measuring certain things. So use
Yeah,
the
like so how do you
psychometric
measure
evaluation. Yeah,
talent? How do you
yeah.
measure desire,
Yeah.
expertise, sales process,
Yeah, do
operationalization?
they know how to overcome objections? Like all these things. Like
Yeah.
when we're talking about the individuals, you want to go really in depth to try to figure out, if you're looking at do they have an introduction? Do they know how to run a discovery call? Do they know how to confirm what they've discovered? Do they know how to present? You need to be very specific about what you're analyzing. I would push what you're saying. It can't be willy nilly at all, and you have to
No.
base it on real data, 100%. You've got to know,
Yeah,
and
because otherwise your analysis will get clouded with subjective opinion that you'll
absolutely,
hear left, right, and
yeah,
center, or Paul was having a bad day because
yeah,
whatever, his car got stolen that morning, and so yeah, obviously his one-on-one with you where you're quote unquote evaluating is not going to go well, right? But if you have this scientific approach to it and you have like specific thing that you want to evaluate, those will come out a bit
yeah,
more
yeah,
or better, sorry, if you have this scientific approach. So and as part of your assessment, it would be how am I going to determine who has sales talent versus
yeah,
who doesn't, or who has desire versus who doesn't, who has expertise versus who doesn't. And
yeah.
obviously you're a consultant. I know you have some assessments for some of the things. Some of the things there's less assessments available, like expertise, because every company sells different things. So expertise, you might maybe sit
Expertise
with
is
a product
probably the
team or the
but
development
expertise is
team.
probably the easiest thing, Fab, because as a company, you know what your people need to know. So that's probably easier to assess because you can just ask
Yeah, but
questions and
I'm
figure. Yeah,
just saying that it's like you probably need to sit with your dev team if you're selling a software, or your production team if you're manufacturing something, to exactly to get it, because again I'm taking the hat that I'm a new sales leader, right? I don't know much about this company yet,
okay, yeah,
and I would sit down and be like, well, what are the things that my salespeople need to know about my product or my service, and then you can measure them, your sales team, against those criteria that you're.
yeah,
So when you're talking about expertise or sales process, I mean, you have experience, or you work with somebody like you, operation op, operationalizing things. It's like understanding each part of the process and from beginning to end. And I would argue sales process and oh man, I'm struggling today. Should go, depending on your business, should go beyond the sale, right? Like what's happening after a sale is done.
yeah,
Are the
yeah,
clients that my
yeah,
people are selling
yeah,
staying with the company, right?
yeah,
Are they happy with the company?
yeah.
Because that has a huge impact on revenue. CRM, what are the criteria that I'm going to evaluate my CRM on, right? Like, is it being used? Can I get insights out of it? Whatever. So I think when you're doing the assessment, you need to have a good framework for assessing. It's not just, okay, Paul, what's up? How's it going? Let's chit chat, talk about, so how are sales going? Good. All right, cool. Well, Paul seems like he knows what he's doing. I don't think that would work.
I agree with you. And there's a lot, we boil it down to a few simple things, but I remember when the best advice I ever got when I became a VP with one of the big corporations is my boss at the time, who was the whatever chief sales officer for a big telecom and media corporation, said to me, I want you for the first 60 days to just observe. And that was probably the best piece of advice I ever got, because it put me in a state of saying, okay, let's see what's going on here. And you really do need to observe before you make decisions. If you just come in with a bunch of preconceived notions, this guy's, you're told by your boss, this guy's a slacker, that guy's a slacker, we're gonna get rid of this guy, that guy, and you're like, okay, and then you walk in, you need to they need to be your opinions, and that's a big and an important part of the assessment.
Yeah, I mean, that story reminds me, I was listening to this was a little while ago, I was listening to a podcast with, and they were interviewing HubSpot's first chief marketing officer. This is a marketing example, but the conclusion is the same, and they were like, what's the worst thing that a new chief marketing officer at a company, or a marketing leader at a company could do? And it's like, yeah, just don't be the marketing leader that just revamps the website. Like, that's the first thing, right? Because you've never taken time to actually understand where the problems were. It's just, website is very visual, like it's very obvious that you've done something new. And this is exactly the same thing. Don't just go in and, well, I like using Salesforce, so we're going to rip out whatever CRM we have and we're going to put in Salesforce. It's really taking the time to observe. Yes, you want to showcase your value early on, but observe. Don't come in with preconceived ideas. I agree. That's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's very, very important. So again, I'm happy you agree. But it's interesting, Fab, and all these steps are very, in a way, it's fun because you can control most of them. I would say 4 of these 5 steps are personally driven. So, analysis, assessment, plan, activate. That's very much driven by the individual. You control them, and that's easy. But the most important phase, if we had to put percentages of what's going to make this happen, I'd put like 1% assessment, 1% analysis, 1% plan, 1% activate, and I'd put 95% buy-in. And then 1% to chance. Why? Yeah, because if you don't get the buy-in, I don't swear a lot on our podcast, but fuck, it's not going to work. Why? Because you don't get the buy-in, you can't do it all yourself. So then it just won't work. And that's super important, to get that buy-in. And to get the buy-in, if you can't get the buy-in, then as a sales manager, you need to make a decision. Do we fire these people? Or, are we going to relook at what we're doing? And that's an assessment. That's in your personal assessment. But you have to get the buy-in, because if your team doesn't want or believe in what you're doing, you're either the wrong sales manager or you have the wrong team. Those are your 2 options.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, some managers have a hard time making that happen. And, that's personality, that's human nature. It's all the qualities that we have as a human being that are subjective and squishy and mushy, that you have to put into application. But it's psychology, whether it's Freudian, Jungian, or whatever more modern. You need to apply the psychology of a sales manager to be able to get that buy-in. And that's that's what you and I have been talking about for years. And that's about connecting with your team, as you do with a client, to understand their motivation, and you connect into the fire to say, do you have the fire to have success? And do you have the fire to be part of the team that's going to make us have success here? So these 5 steps they're all important. Like, if you don't do the assessment and the analysis, the plan and the activation, your buy-in is going to be useless. And I'm exaggerating a little bit on percentages, but you need to do all 5 of these steps, because if you forget one of them, then it doesn't matter if you got the buy-in of your team. If you got a shitty plan, it's it's not going to
Yeah, but
help.
I would say like it's almost better to have a shitty plan and buy-in that you then iterate and change, right? And be like, okay, well, you know what? We realized that our plan was wonky, but the only way we know that is because we had buy-in, so people were willing to execute on it, and we tracked, reviewed, and iterated, so
Yeah,
we're able to change and adapt, right? Like, because you're right. I mean, obviously, you want to. The best plan is it's
a
better
good
to have a
plan.
good plan, but I'm just saying if I had to choose between a good plan and no buy-in and buy-in and a mediocre plan, I'd rather take the buy-in and the mediocre plan. At least we're moving forward and trying stuff and we're moving
Yeah,
forward than having a plan that just stays in a drawer somewhere and end up quitting in
yeah.
frustration 6 months down the line or whatever,
Just because I'm argumentative today, I would say to you that if you have a mediocre plan with the buy-in, what you're saying is better to have, to a certain extent, some form of unconditional buy-in, which is rare. But let's say you have that; they just follow
Yeah.
you and believe in you. Um, a mediocre plan, or a plan that's not perfect, at least moves in the right direction. Whereas if you have a perfect plan, I think what you're saying, and you have no buy-in, well, then you're just not going to get activated. So I hear you. Um, I hear you, but they're both important, right? So,
Yeah, of course.
um,
Of course.
yeah.
Like I'm not
You're
delusional.
not
I'm just
proning a
saying
bad plan.
yeah, yeah. I'm just saying, let's say you're doing your assessment and you believe expertise is your biggest challenge at the moment, and the reps believe it. Yes, we didn't have a great onboarding. We don't really know what we're selling, and you build a plan to build that expertise, and you track and review it, and realize, you know what, expertise hasn't really moved the needle, right? There's a challenge somewhere else that we didn't observe. I think that'll go a longer way than saying, you know what, the problem is sales process. Our sales process is
Yeah,
just, there's none, right? It was just
yeah,
invented by salespeople along the way. And then your sales team is like, no, like I'm not, this is great. It's working for me. I'm not changing that. And then you try to fit in a new sales process down their throat. Yeah,
yeah,
you're not going to change either. The only thing that's going to happen is you'll get fired or the whole team will get fired and you have to rebuild,
yeah,
which,
yeah. No,
might be a good thing, but still.
no, it's true. And having lived through this a few times and being a consultant, um, often, often, if I was, and I don't want to paint everyone in the same brush, but often what I see is that there's a lot of expertise on the product, and it falls apart in that there's a bad plan, and they don't work enough on helping people get better with their sales skills.
Mm.
And also they don't get the buy-in. It's more like, do it this way or you're fired. And it's their prerogative, but if you really want to move the needle, you have to really think about that. You have your
Yeah.
sales manager or your sales leader or your VP sales or whoever it is leading whatever team it is, whether it's a VP sales that's leading a bunch of sales directors, or a bunch of sales directors leading sales managers, or sales managers leading reps. They all have to be, I don't want to say inspiring, but they all have to inspire the desire of the people on their team to want to do a good job. And,
Yeah.
and that's important.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, like we said before, the outset is like every team is different, every company is different. I work with a lot of startups where sometimes there's no onboarding, and so yeah, I've seen reps that just know nothing about the product, right? Because they're
Yeah.
just there's no process, there's no operationalization, so their training is. Hey, Paul, welcome to the team. Like, here's a list of cold leads. Like we kind of sell this
Yeah.
software that does ABC, and like go for it. But you could be working with a much more established company where there's a lot of product expertise and no sales
Yeah.
training in terms of sales skills training. So that's where the assessment is so critical, because, and you could have both, right? Like in my example of this hypothetical startup, there could be no sales skill training, no expertise, but just like a high desire, right? Like these are young
Yeah.
bucks that want to succeed, excuse me. So that like, okay, well, maybe my priorities are sales skill and expertise, right? This is what we're going to prioritize. This is my plan. Whatever. So that's where the assessment is so important,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
every company is different. or sometimes your product is just so complex, and it's not that your sales team needs expertise. They just need to work better with an episode we did a long time ago with a sales engineer, right? And so
Yep.
maybe it's like, how do we work with, like there's so many variables out there. But that's why your assessment is so critical.
Absolutely. And if we come back to the assessment, whatever it is that you prefer, you need, I believe in psychometric assessments to understand the individual. Now, I don't believe that they're the be all end all, but if you look at that, at least it's a starting point as a discussion. I think you should be doing a hardcore sales assessment to see what their values and what their knowledge in sales is. And you should have some form of internal expertise assessment, which you create based on what it is that they need to know. Because if they understand themselves as a human being, if they understand what their sales skills are and they understand their product, well, at least then you've got something to work on to understand. And that should be part of your assessment. And then from there, in your analysis, well, how do these things work together with the individual? How does a team work? What are the processes we want to put in part? That's all part of your analysis. Then creating your plan with what's there, buy in, and then activate. It just boils down to that. Now, we've talked a lot about the different stages, and honestly, one thing we haven't talked about is, and let's talk about it quickly, is what are the qualities that the sales leader should have? Well, he or she should for sure be someone who is willing to take on the tasks of what's at hand, right? What are our
Yeah.
expectations? Are we hiring a VP? Are we looking for someone to be creative? Are we looking for a director level person or someone who's going to execute the VP strategy, still have some creativity? Or are we looking for a sales manager who's really, like a sergeant in the field helping people do the right thing? So, but at all these levels, you need to, every one of those people, no matter what level you're at, needs to have the capacity to have that buy-in and understand what it is tactically, concretely, not tactically, but concretely know what it is that, where the risks are, where the gaps are, where the weaknesses are, and where the strengths are, and how to make that move forward.
You're right. Absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, like a lot of this rests on the sales leader's capabilities, right? Like, at the end of the day, like you've mentioned it. And so understanding yourself as a sales leader, or if you're the person hiring the sales leader, understanding what needs to be required. And it's not, unfortunately, like the sales leader is often the most performance salesperson, which I'd argue more often than not doesn't work, right? Because in the same way that we undertrain salespeople and their sales skills, we undertrain sales leaders and leadership skills, which is very different, right? Like a sales leader skills and day-to-day job is 100% different than what they were used to in the field, quote unquote. Even if in
Yeah.
the field there's Zoom calls all day, but you're right. Like that's a critical component also.
Yeah, you're right, and this is very anecdotal, but what I've noticed in the people that I've worked with over the last whatever, I've been in sales forever, the last 30 years, is that there is one type of sales performer that does really well in sales management, and that's the sales performer who was very consultative, however you say it, the person who took the time to understand their clients, who asked questions, who took the time to understand the motivation. Because that type of sales performer, if you apply the same method to your sales team, and you discover what it is that drives them, and then you give them, or not give them, but you help them see the path to their own success, usually has success, because then they start seeing their sales team as prospects and clients who they have to help move forward. And so there is. Now, if we're talking about the
Yeah,
lone wolf who goes
they
there
just
and
have to
does
be
everything on
able
their own.
to flip their mindset so that we're applying these skills. Because what I've seen is also like they're great at being consultative and stuff like that, but they have a hard time applying those skills to managing a team,
That's
right?
because
They're
they
like,
don't. The people who have a hard time doing that are the ones that, I'm a natural. They're lone wolves. They go out, they
yeah,
sell, they know, and they don't really know how they're doing it. So then it's hard for them to show someone else how they do it, because they're
fair
like,
enough.
I don't know. I was talking to some guy last week. I said, why do you think you do so well? I don't know. but he's good, or the guy in this case, he's really good at what he does, but he doesn't know why. Well, that's kind of hard. You don't necessarily want to put that person in charge of other salespeople, because what's he going to do? He can go on the road with them and do it, but then he can't describe it or analyze it. So yeah. I like this. This is a good one. Is there anything else we want to add, or we want to wrap it up?
No, I think the only thing I'd wrap up is saying, we said earlier that, you shouldn't come in with preconceived ideas. I think the only preconceived idea should be to just switch your CRM to HubSpot. I think that.
That's funny.
I'm kidding.
I know you are.
But I just have to say that.
I wonder why you say that, Fabrice.
But no, I think this was good. I think the takeaways are there. There's 7 steps if you separate decision and or plan and buy-in, and if you add in the first step, which was just being aware that you can't force anything down everybody's throat. There's these 7 steps. Is taking that first step, accepting that you can't force anything down the throat, assess all the elements of a sales department and group and functioning, analyze them all, plan them, get the buy-in, activate, and almost second most importantly after buy-in is track, review, and iterate. It's not an
ongoing
project, right?
process.
Yeah. This is not a project. It's a process, and that's your role as a sales leader. That's what you get paid every 2 weeks, is to be there constantly and to review and to improve and to iterate. If you think of it, this is a one shot. I need to train them on sales skills, and we'll get Paul to come in for a couple of weeks and train them and then leave. Yeah, it's not going to work. It might work temporarily, but
that's part 1 or phase 1. Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah.
And unless your project is a lifelong process.
Yeah. Yes, there you go. A project with no end. Exactly. All right, Paul, this has been good. This has been fun. I really enjoyed it.
So did I.
Thanks everybody. We'll talk to you soon enough.
Merci beaucoup. Have a good one, everyone.